but from incontinence. For he may be more easily cured, because he may be induced to change his opinion. But the incontinent man is obnoxious to the proverb in which we say, When water suffocates, what occasion is there to drink ? For if, indeed, he were persuaded to do what he did, if he had been induced to change his opinion, he would have desisted. But now, not being persuaded, he nevertheless acts in this manner. Farther still, if incontinence and continence are conversant with all things, who is the man that is simply incontinent ? For no one has every species of incontinence. And we say that some persons are simply incontinent. Such therefore are the doubts which happen on this subject. But of these it is necessary to take away some, and to leave others ; for the solution of a doubt is the discovery of what is investigated. CHAPTER 3. In the first place, therefore, it must be considered, whether the incontinent act knowingly or not, and in what manner they act knowingly. In the next place, with what kind of things the incontinent and the continent man are conversant. I mean, whether they are conversant with all pleasure and pain, or with certain definite pleasures and pains, and whether the continent and the enduring man are the same, or different characters. And in a similar manner we must consider such other things as are allied to this theory. The beginning, however, of the speculation is, whether the continent and incontinent man differ in the things with which they are conversant, or in the mode in which they are conversant with them. My meaning is this, whether the incontinent man is alone incontinent, or not, because he is conversant with these particular things, or whether it is because he is thus affected, or not, or whether it is from both of these. In the next place, whether incontinence and continence are conversant with all things, or not. For he who is simply incontinent is not conversant with all things, but with those things with which the intemperate man is conversant. Nor is he denominated incontinent from being simply affected towards these ; for if he were, incontinence would be the same with intemperance, but from being affected towards them in this particular manner. For the intemperate man indeed is led by his desires from deliberate choice, thinking that it is always necessary to pursue the present delight. But the incontinent man does not think this is necessary, yet pursues it. With respect, therefore, to the assertion that it is true opinion and not science through which men act incontinently, it is of no consequence to the present discussion. For some of those who form opinions of things entertain no doubt of their truth, but think that they know accurately. If, therefore, those who form an opinion act in a greater degree contrary to their opinion than those who have a scientific knowledge, because they believe negligently, science will in no respect differ from opinion. For some persons believe no less firmly in things of which they form an opinion, than others in things which they know scientifically. But this is evident from Heraclitus. Since, however, we say that a man knows scientifically in a twofold respect, for both he who possesses science indeed, but does not use it, and he who uses it, are said to have scientific knowledge, it makes a difference whether a man possessing science, but not contemplating, does what he ought not to do, or whether possessing science and contemplating he acts improperly. For this appears to be absurd, but it is not if he does not contemplate. Again, since there are two modes of propositions, i.e. universal and particular propositions, nothing hinders but that he who possesses both these may act contrary to science, using indeed the universal proposition, but not the particular one, for particulars are practicable. There is a difference, also, as to the universal. For one difference, indeed, is in the man himself, but the other is in the thing. Thus, for instance, a man may know that dry food is beneficial to every man, and that this person is a man, or that a thing of such a kind is dry food. But whether this is a thing of such a kind, he either does not know, or he does not energize as if he did know. There is an immense difference, therefore, according to these modes, so that no absurdity follows, for a man thus to know. But for him to know in any other way, it would be wonderful. Farther still, science may be inherent in men in a way different from that which we have just now mentioned. For we see that habit differs in possessing, indeed, but not using science, so that a man possesses, in a certain respect, and does not possess science, as is the case with him who is asleep, or insane, or intoxicated. But in this way men are disposed, who are under the influence of the passions, for anger, and the desire of venereal pleasures, and certain other things of this kind, evidently produce a change in the body, and in some persons also they produce insanity. It is manifest, therefore, that the incontinent man must be said to be affected similarly to these persons. Nor is it any indication of the contrary, if such persons utter sentences which are the progeny of science. For those who are under the influence of these passions will recite demonstrations, and the verses of Empedocles. And those who first learn a science connect indeed the words, but do not yet know their meaning. For it is necessary that science should increase with advancing age, but this requires time. Hence it must be admitted that the incontinent speak after the manner of players, i.e. without attending to the meaning of what they say. Again, the cause of this may also be physically surveyed as follows. Opinion, indeed, is either universal or particular, of which latter, sense is now the mistress. But when one reason is produced from both these, it is necessary that, so far as pertains to theory, the soul should enunciate the conclusion, but so far as pertains to practice, should immediately act. Thus for instance, if every sweet thing ought to be tasted, but this thing is sweet as being some one of particulars, it necessarily follows that he who is able, and is not impeded, must at the same time that he says this, act, i.e. taste the sweet thing. When, therefore, the universal proposition is indeed inherent, which prohibits a thing from being tasted, but another proposition says, that every thing which is sweet is delectable, and another, that this particular thing is sweet, and this causes the man to energize, and when, also, desire happens to be inherent, then the universal proposition, indeed, says this thing is to be avoided, but desire leads to the fruition of it. For each of the parts of the soul is able to move, or excite. Hence it happens that a man acts incontinently, both from reason, in a certain respect, and opinion. Though opinion is not essentially, but from accident contrary to reason. For desire, but not opinion, is contrary to right reason. Hence, on this account, also, brutes are not incontinent, because they have not a perception of universal, but an imagination and memory of particulars. With respect to the manner, however, in which ignorance is dissolved, and the incontinent man again becomes in possession of scientific knowledge, the reasoning is the same as concerning him who is intoxicated or asleep, and is not peculiar to this passion, but the explanation of it must be obtained from physiologists. Because, however, the last proposition is the opinion of the sensible object, and is the mistress of actions. He who is under the influence of passion either has not this proposition, or he has it in such a way, that from possessing he has not a scientific knowledge of it, but merely enunciates it, just as he who is intoxicated recites the verses of Empedocles. And likewise, because the last proposition is not universal, and does not appear to be similarly scientific, with the proposition which is universal. That also which Socrates investigated appears in this case to happen. For the passion is not produced when that which is science, properly so called, is seen to be present. Nor is this science